Good evening friends, welcome to our online program where we discuss important issues of current affairs in the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination. We deal with relevant topics which can be important for you from the perspective of prelims, mains as well as the interview. So today let us discuss the ethical issues in latest Israel-Hamas conflict. Right now, since the first week of this month, we have seen that due to unprovoked unilateral fire by Hamas and counter attack by Israel, in the Gaza Strip there has been an ongoing conflict where a lot of ethical issues are involved. So today our focus will be on the ethical issues of Israel-Hamas conflict. We want to go in the historical aspects or the geographical aspects of the issue. We will only focus upon the ethical aspects or the ethical issues involved in the conflict. So now let us see that how this issue relates to the UPSC Civil Services examination, particularly the main examination. As we know that ethics, integrity and aptitude, it is the GS paper 4 of UPSC main examination, Civil Services examination, and this particular topic which we have taken for today, it is related to ethical issues in international relations and funding. So it is a topic in the paper 4 of UPSC Civil Services main examination, ethical issues in international relations and funding. Wars and conflicts are components of international relations, and foreign funding, international aids, they are also components of international relations. So we will see that what are the ethical issues in the particular ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Okay. So first of all, let us understand what is the ethics of war and conflicts. Primarily, in almost all modern societies, war is considered unethical, conflicts are considered unethical. Why they are considered unethical? Wars and conflicts involve violence. Wars and conflicts, they are primarily motivated by hate, animosity, enmity. At the same time, wars lead to intergenerational spread of hatred. War and conflict, it creates a cycle of violence. So the first basic thing when we talk about the ethical aspects of a war or a conflict is that war is primarily an unethical act due to the hate and violence and all the bloodshed involved in conflicts and wars. So this is the first thing. We must remind ourselves of the teachings in the epics and scriptures. For example, you can take Mahabharata, in which Krishna says that war is the last resort. As the last tool it should be used. War should be the last tool which should be used to resolve any dispute or conflict. Likewise, we find instances in Ramayana where on all instances there is an attempt or an effort to persuade Ravan so that she lets Sita free. So ultimately, when all such efforts could not succeed, ultimately it led to the great war of Ramayana between Ram and Ravan. So all those folklores and all those scriptures, they tell us that war and conflicts are most avoidable as they beget a lot of disaster, a lot of tragedy to the humankind in general. Okay. So people who are victims of war, they are not only the recipients of those tragedies, but world in general, mankind in general, humanity in general is the recipient of such tragedies. Now coming to the ethical war or just war. So if all wars and conflicts are unethical, then wars and conflicts are common. History is full of such examples. History is complete of such examples where wars and conflicts have been undertaken to resolve disputes. So what is the ethical ground of a conflict or a violent conflict or war? There is a theory of just war. So war can be defended on the basis of moral values. War can be defended on the basis of protecting the rights of the civilians, of the innocents, the oppressed sections. At the same time, war can be waged to defend oneself. So, self defense is also a basis or a ground to wage war. Okay. Now, so always we have two options, war and peace. Peace is the most preferable. War is justified in some instances, as I said. First is self defense, on the ground which Israel has Israel has counter attacked Gaza. On the ground of self defense, the global community including the West also acknowledging the right to self defense of Israel. So, war can be justified on the basis of self defense. Second thing is on humanitarian grounds. For example, the Iraq war by the United States was initiated on the basis of humanitarian grounds, and the third thing is to protect the oppressed civilian population. So, these are the basis for which war can be considered or conflict can be considered as ethical. Now, coming to the Israel-Hamas conflict and what are the specific ethical issues involved in the particular ongoing war. As we know that on 7th of October, there was an unprovoked unilateral armed action by Hamas. So, as we are undertaking the discussion, so few terms may come which you may find difficult to understand. So, what is Hamas? Hamas is a militant organization which is also politically relevant in the Gaza Strip. So, presently Palestine, it comprises of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So, Hamas has formed the government and rules the Gaza Strip. It is the majority, you can say, political faction in the Palestinian Legislative Assembly, which has 132 seats, out of which 74 is occupied by Hamas. So, in the second election to the Palestinian Legislative Assembly, Hamas won the majority of seats, 74 out of 132. So, it is a relevant political actor there. At the same time, it is recognized as a militant organization, as a terrorist organization by the West and their allies. So, there was and Hamas proclaims that it is fighting for a free Palestinian cause. It wants to promote, it says that it wants to promote the cause of Palestinian people to have their own sovereign homeland. Okay. So, this is a brief background of Hamas. Now, coming to, so on 7th of October, we saw that there was a unilateral unprovoked action by Hamas. A barrage of rockets were fired from Gaza into the Israeli territory, what Israel says, and as we know that why it is an ethical issue. So, it is an ethical issue as we know that there is always the preference for peaceful resolution of disputes at the international level. If there is an ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine, so the most preferable way is to resolve it peacefully. We know that in the past there were Oslo Accords and peace processes were undertaken by PLA, that is the Palestine Liberation Authority under the leadership of Yasser Arafat. So, that is the path to resolve disputes. But what Hamas did, it launched an armed attack on the Israeli territory, not only using rockets but also by ground invasion. Okay. So, this unprovoked unilateral armed action is a violation of international norms. United Nations Charter, it prohibits any forced or coercive unilateral action on another party to resolve a dispute. So, this is the first thing. Okay. Now, coming to the second, terrorism. What is the second ethical issue involved in the action of Hamas? So, India has also condemned the action. The Prime Minister of India also tweeted in support of Israel, saying that we condemn the terrorist action by Hamas. So, we know that terrorism is an organized crime, and any form of violence to instill fear in a wider population is unethical, totally unethical. So, this is a major ethical issue, as we know that many nations including India are facing the scourge of terrorism. We are ourselves the victims of terrorism. Okay. So, the second ethical issue is the issue of terror, to inflict terror in a wider population. So, that is what Hamas attempted to do. The third thing was heavy attack on civilian population without warning. So, as we know that the Geneva Convention and the International Humanitarian Law, that is the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention, and other rules and regulations which deal with the norms to be followed during armed conflict. So, they say that a civilian population must be pre-warned before any such military strike, but Hamas without any without any warning or alerting the civilian population, it launched a surprise attack. So, this is also violation of additional protocol of Geneva Convention. So, let me add here that Geneva Convention and Hague Convention, other norms and regulations, they together comprise the International Humanitarian Law or the law of armed combats, which prescribe standards and principles which had to be followed by parties involved in an armed conflict. Okay. So, Hamas violated that obligation and it attacked, it launched a surprise attack on the Israeli citizens, civilians. We had also seen that innocent civilians were killed. The attackers, the militants of Hamas went on a rampage and they killed innocent civilians. They spared none, even children, senior citizens, elderly, disabled, all were brutally killed and murdered, injured by the ground infiltrators of Hamas. They also took hostages. With them, which is again, so killing and taking hostage, we know that under international law, so such actions are prohibited. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, under its Article 3, it says that every person, every individual has the right to life, liberty and safety of person. So, when we say that it is an ethical issue, why it is an ethical issue? As it violates international norms and principles. So, it is a violation of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. It is a violation of human rights. Now, coming to the next ethical issue is inhuman treatment to the wounded and dead. So, there were multiple reports on media that the Hamas militants, they had no respect for the injured. They even paraded the dead bodies of the people they killed, the civilians they killed. So, these are the most brutal and cruel acts which can be committed upon humanity. So, when it comes to ethical issues, so we can say that these are gross violation of human rights, these are gross violation of any civilized behavior. So, in this context, they are violations of international norms. Now, the next point is using civilians as human shield. Terrorist organizations, militant organizations and as a strategy of military tactics. So, this is employed frequently in war zones, that civilians are taken hostages and they are used as war shields. Okay? And if not they are taken hostages, then the militants try to merge into the civilian population and using that as a human shield, they want to protect themselves. Okay? So, this again is a violation of the additional protocol of Geneva Convention, where it is very clearly stated that safety of any person cannot be compromised. So, if somebody is using civilians as human shields or human beings as human shields, so that amounts to putting the safety of the person in danger. So, the safety of the person is put in danger. That is again a violation of the additional protocol of the Geneva Convention. Okay? So, on the basis of violation of international humanitarian laws, these acts of Hamas can be said to be unethical. And the next can be said about heavy attack without warning. As we discussed, so there must be an alert, by the attacker if the target is going to be the civilian area, but Hamas did not observe any such laws or norms. Now, if we see in the wider perspective of bringing peace and stability to the West Asian region, Middle East region and the North African region, we see that the diplomatic relation between Israel and Arab states has been historically strained. So, this action by Hamas, so what is another ethical issue involved is that this action by Hamas has tried to push back the normalization of ties between Israel and other Arab states. You must have heard about Abraham Accords of 2020 during the presidency of then US President Mr. Donald J. Trump. So, on the mediation of United States, it was attempted to normalize diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab states. For example, you can take UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, etc. So, with all these Arab nations, there were agreements signed, so that the diplomatic relations can be normalized. Now, it was attempted to bring peace in the MENA region. MENA region means Middle East and North African region. Middle East and North African region. Now, Hamas saw that if such kind of normalization of ties takes place, so its own interest in the region will be sidelined. That is why by launching such a heavy attack on the Israeli civilians, it wanted to destabilize the ongoing normalization of ties between Israel and the Arab nations. So, this again is an ethical issue where there is an attempt to halt and destabilize the region, where there is an attempt to obstruct peace process in the region. So, these are the ethical issues when we see from the perspective, from the point of view of Hamas as a militant organization. Now, coming to what are the ethical issues involved in the action or the counter action by Israel. We know that on the 7th of October this year, in this very month, so there was an attack launched by Hamas. In response to that, there was rage in Israel and the larger global community, and Israel as a sort of counter action or a retaliatory measure, it launched counter offensive on the Gaza Strip. We know that Gaza Strip is a thin strip of territory on the Mediterranean coast, and almost 2 million Palestinians, they live in Gaza Strip, that is around 20 to 22 lakh people. 2.2 million Gaza, 2.2 million Palestinian, they live in Gaza, of which 50% is said to be children. Okay. So, the counter measure by Israel, counter attack by Israel, it has also multiple ethical issues involved. There are also several crucial issues of ethics and morality, violation of international norms, and the basic human values in the actions by Israel. So, the first point is disproportionate reaction. It was said that due to the rage and fury, due to the rage in Israel on one of the biggest militant attack on its people, so Israel launched a number of air strikes on the Gaza population, on the city of Gaza. So, it was said that the number of air strikes and the number of rockets and missiles launched, so it was a disproportionate reaction to what Hamas had done. First thing, disproportionate in the sense when the US President Mr. Joe Biden, he recently concluded his visit to Israel, he also warned and cautioned Israel that and he reminded them of the 9/11 incident which had taken place in the United States. That was also one of the biggest terrorist attacks on the land of US. So, Mr. Biden, he reminded Israel of the fact that they had also committed mistakes while reacting in rage. So, he cautioned that the actions or the retaliatory measures of Israel should be balanced, it should not be disproportionate. How we can say that it is disproportionate? By the number of air strikes, continuous air strikes on the Gaza population. Second thing is not sparing even the civilian areas, even areas where people take refuge during the times of war. So, the action, the counter response by Israel is said to be disproportionate, The second ethical issue which arises in this conflict, and an important point to note down, is the collective punishment. It is an important concept to understand, particularly this term arises during the armed conflict period. Let us understand this term. So, what is collective punishment? Punishment means when you impose penalty or punish an individual for an act committed by him or her. But collective punishment means when you are punishing an entire group or community or population for an act committed by one or few member of that group. Okay? Mean to say that if there is a group and one or few member of that group committed any mistake. Now, as a retaliation, if you punish the entire member of the group or community, that would amount to collective punishment, which is prohibited very clearly under Article 33 of the Additional Protocol of Geneva Convention 1949, under which is prohibited very clearly under Article 33 of Additional Protocol of Geneva Convention 1947. So, here as we discussed, the action by Hamas was very brutal, and Hamas is a militant organization operating out of Gaza Strip. But as the population of Gaza is 2.2 million and the entire population cannot be held guilty for an attack by an militant organization operating out of their soil. Okay. But the action of Israel in the form of blockade of all sorts on Gaza Strip, even the supplies of food, electricity, fuel and humanitarian aid has been completely stopped. So, this amounts to the most severe restrictions on an entire population of 2.2 million people, and it is a clear form of collective punishment, which is very specifically prohibited under international humanitarian laws. Okay. Now, this concept is clear. Now, the second thing is, the third thing is forced displacement. Forced displacement. Recently, on 13th of October, so the Israel Defense Forces IDF, they passed evacuation orders, they issued evacuation orders to the residents of northern Gaza, asking them to empty their homes and leave for southern Gaza. So, this evacuation order issued to an entire around 1 million people, like half of the population of Gaza. It amounts to forced displacement of an entire population during any armed conflict. That is also again prohibited under Geneva Convention or International Humanitarian Law. That is why it is again an ethical issue, as it violates the prescribed laws and norms for armed conflict. What is forced displacement? Forced displacement can happen due to war or non-war scenario. Due to non-war scenario also, people can get displaced, people become climate refugees, people they migrate from one place to another place out of fear, which is not, which cannot be always war. Okay. So, but in the present case, people were forced to move, or people were forced to move from their place of habitat by an order, an evacuation order of the Israeli Defense Forces. Simply saying, forced displacement is the involuntary or coerced movement of a group of population, individuals or group of population from their home or place of habitat to another place. Okay. So, the evacuation order issued by the Israeli Defense Forces, they effectively forced the population, almost half the population of Gaza, to migrate to another area, at a time when the border along the Gaza and Israel has been completely closed, the Rafah border. So, forced displacement also is prohibited under Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention. That is also prohibited under Article 49 of 4th Geneva Convention. Okay. The fourth thing is, the Israeli forces have also conducted air strikes on civilian and residential areas, including hospitals. The Al Ahli Arab Hospital was attacked few days back, and the Palestinians are alleging that it was an air strike by Israeli forces. Israel is claiming that it took place due to an explosion by a rocket misfired by another militant organization operating out of Palestine, which was Islamic Jihad. Okay. So, Israel says that it is not our action, Palestinians say that no, you have targeted the hospital. But apart from that particular hospital, such places where people sought refuge from the ongoing conflict were attacked. Churches were attacked by air strikes, and markets were attacked by air strikes, which are prohibited again under the international humanitarian law. So, the ethical issue again here involved is that the attack on civilian areas and residential areas, which primarily makes the civilian population as the target of conflict. Okay. So, this is another ethical issue. Now, coming to the next point, which is restricting humanitarian aid and peace corridor in Gaza Strip. How it is an ethical issue? Actually, in the times of wars and conflicts, so it becomes very difficult for people to get their basic necessities or to procure their basic necessities, okay, like food, fuel, water and all such things of daily life. So, it is an international standard or a norm for armed conflict that the parties in war must allow the movement of humanitarian aid in the conflict zone, first point. Second thing is that there must be peace corridors, there must be corridors which should be identified and should not be attacked, giving prior notice to the population, so that they can procure their things of their basic necessities of daily life. But as we have seen that Israel in the present ongoing conflict has restricted the flow or movement of humanitarian aid, as well as has not agreed for any kind of peace corridor in the Gaza Strip. After the conclusion of the visit of the US President, Israel has agreed to open the crossing along the Egyptian border only on the condition that all the Israeli hostages taken by Hamas has to be released. So, it is again an ethical issue, as the entire population gets trapped in a conflict area, but they have no access to the humanitarian aid. Okay. Now, one point is which is another ethical issue, use of white phosphorus by Israel. Okay. White phosphorus, it is used in munitions, it is used in explosives, it is not used for its toxicity, but it actually acts as a smoke screen. Okay. So, as such white phosphorus is not banned completely, but the convention on chemical weapons, they regulate the use of white phosphorus in armed conflict. So, use of white phosphorus has long term effect on health of civilians. That is why it is not completely banned, though regulated by the convention on chemical weapons. Okay. So, this again is an ethical issue where such regulated items are being used, in conflict, that may have a toll on long term health of the civilians of Gaza. Okay. So, these are the ethical issues which we can see from the point of view of the Israeli action. Okay. Now, coming to the other ethical issues which are associated with this conflict. See, this is the age of information, okay, age of social media, age of internet, but rather it has turned out to be an age of misinformation and propaganda. In the present ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, we have seen that there is a flood of misinformation and propaganda from both sides and other stakeholders to present their side of their point of view as accurate and blaming the other for their actions. So, misinformation is spread through multiple print and digital media. Propaganda by state and non-state actors is an ethical issue which denies people the access to accurate information, authentic information to form their opinion. Okay. So, it is an ethical issue. Second thing is unclaimed and unverified statements even by the officials. We recently have seen that the United States President Mr. Joe Biden had made a claim that he had seen pictures and videos of Israeli babies being decapitated by Hamas militants. But later on the White House had to clarify that the president himself had not seen the images, he was referring to reports from Israel. So, as we see that the unverified claims made even by the state authorities, as we just cited the example of the President of the United States. So, where the claims made by the state authorities also are not based upon verified sources, okay, but unverified sources. So these produce an unethical scenario, lack of ethical standards, where the statements are not based upon verified sources. Okay. Now coming to the third ethical issue is polarized opinions. These ethical issues we are discussing other than the point of view of the attack by Hamas and the counter attack by Israel. So these ethical issues are in context of parties other than Israel and Hamas. So the third is polarized opinions. We see that there is an increase in polarization of opinion along political class, along people across the world, across different political ideologies. Okay. So due to misinformation and propaganda, there is polarization of popular opinion, which leads to hate crimes and attacks. Okay. So after the onset of this conflict, so there were incidents and reports of hate crimes and attacks based on nationality, based upon religion, particularly in United States and Europe. So some places individuals of a particular community were targeted, worship places of worship of a particular community was targeted. So these hate crimes and attacks are also an output or an outcome of these misinformation and propaganda. One important ethical issue which arises in these situations is that innocent people like the journalists who are doing their work on such conflict zones, health workers, doctors, relief aid workers, they also become victim of war. So after the start of this conflict, reportedly 21 journalists have been killed due to this particular conflict. Okay. So innocent victims like journalists, health workers, relief aid workers, they also become targets of such violence, and in the process of doing their professional duty, they get killed, okay, or they get injured. So this is another ethical issue. Now coming to the international perspective, coming to the perspective of international organizations, where platforms like United Nations Security Council have failed to bring some humanitarian respite or some immediate solution in sight of these type of conflicts. Okay. Recently, few days back, we had seen that there was a call in the United Nations Security Council, which is one of the 6 principal bodies of the United Nations. So in United Nations Security Council, there was a call for humanitarian relief and peace corridor and pause in the ongoing conflict in Gaza Strip. Okay. But such call was vetoed by the United States, unfortunately. Okay. So the ethical issue involved is that when due to geopolitics and due to national interest, due to achieving self national interest, due to the goal of achieving such interest, nations, they prioritize their own interest over the humanitarian need. Okay. So in the present conflict, international organizations, they have not been effective. The UN agencies, United Nations Security Council, they have not been effective enough to provide immediate respite to the people. Okay. Now, and another important ethical issue is dilemmas in foreign policy. So these type of conflict, they present solid foreign policy dilemmas, which is being faced by India also. There are atrocities, there are violations of human rights, there are violation of the international laws by both sides, by both Israel and Hamas, as we discussed in our discussion. So it presents a foreign policy dilemma that whom should be support. Okay. So India has a principled stand over the Israel-Palestine issue, that is a two-state solution to the problem. Okay. So the Indian Prime Minister and the Ministry of External Affairs also reiterated India's stand, India's long-standing consistent policy towards Palestine and Israel problem, that is a two-state solution. But in these type of instances, in these type of conflicts, it always presents a dilemma to stand in whose favor, in whose support. Okay. So it becomes a very deft task or it takes much diplomatic nuance to frame a foreign policy in these type of scenarios. So, it always presents an ethical dilemma to choose or pick sides. Okay. So, this is again an ethical issue. Now, coming to ethical issues related to funding in this particular conflict. As we know that there is the ethical concerns of funding also is in your syllabus. Okay. So, ethical issues related to funding involved in this particular conflict or the larger Israel-Palestine issue is foreign funding of Israel. Okay. So, Israel receives funding from nations like United States. United States provides $3.8 billion of annual military support to Israel. Okay. And it is alleged that due to the aid by the United States, so Israel military power and Israel technological strength in the region has become much more strong than its rivals. So, the rivals of Israel, they blame that due to the funding by the United States, the Israeli action against Palestine, and as they allege that the Israeli operation or occupation of the Palestinian territory is funded by the United States. Okay? Fine. Now, recently also there was a new financial package submitted by the US government to the Congress of around $100 billion, out of which some finances, some money had to be provided to Israel also in this insight of this conflict. Okay. So, the funding of Israel by the United States is considered to provide more power and supporting Israel in the overall conflict going on in the West Asia. Okay. So, it establishes Israel's hegemony, which is the core, which is one core element of the United States policy towards West Asia. Okay. So, there are allegations that such fundings, they support and strengthen Israeli actions against Palestinians. Now, coming to the funding of Hamas, as we had discussed that Hamas is a recognized militant organization. Okay. And it keeps on launching attacks. It has waged a constant war against Israel using violent means, and the Western nations, the United States and its allies, they allege that Hamas is funded by nations like Iran. Okay, by nations like Iran. Other than that, the ethical issue in funding is a portion of humanitarian aid which flows to Gaza Strip is siphoned off or taken away by the Hamas as they are in power in Gaza. Okay. So, as the humanitarian aids are given to the people of Gaza, that is siphoned off by the Hamas organization, whereas Hamas it says that its funding, its finances for governance as well as its operations are different, but the allegations by the United States and its allies are that Hamas siphons off such humanitarian aid funds for its own operations. Okay. So, it presents an ethical dilemma for the larger global community, international community, to provide relief fund to people of Gaza. Okay. So, this was an overview of the ethical issues involved in the ongoing Israeli-Hamas conflict. We welcome your feedback. So, kindly provide your feedback, and if you find the program informative, the session informative, kindly like and share the video. Thank you so much for joining this session.